Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Vandekar. I work for Autodesk, and I manage a group of developer advocates in the Autodesk Developer Network program. Today, we're going to talk about the manufacturing data model, and we're going to give an overview and some updates of some new features that are coming. So the very first thing, which you've probably seen a million times now, is the safe harbor statement. Just want to point out that some of the details we're going to cover are forward-looking, and the main point of the safe harbor is just to bring awareness to that and make sure you understand you shouldn't make business decisions around some of these forward-looking statements. So our agenda for today is to revisit the Autodesk data strategy. Just want to make sure everyone understands what our data strategy is. And then for the manufacturing data model, we'll go into the developer tools available. We'll talk about the manufacturing data model API functionality, and then we'll give a preview of this coming functionality for V3. We'll do some use cases and workflow examples, and then we'll wrap up with some developer documentation and summary of the resources. So to get started, we'll talk about the Autodesk data strategy. So over the years, we've seen three key trends emerging and accelerating from our customer base. Our customers mainly need more automation, whether this is to increase productivity, improve efficiency, or just faster time to the market. There's also an increased need for collaboration, whether that is within an organization or across disciplines and across companies. And we're seeing a trend towards industry convergence. So more and more our customers are working across AEC, manufacturing, and media and entertainment industries. And so really at the foundation of all these trends lies access to data. So to bring this to maturity, our three pillars to make this happen are around data granularity, and this is where the Autodesk data models come into play. We're really focused on making sure the data that you need, and only the data that you need, is available to you at the time you need it, and for those users who need it and no one else. We're also focused on interoperability, and although we're not going to talk too much about that in this session, just want to make sure you're aware that we're working on the Autodesk Data Exchange data models as well. Data Exchange basically allows this idea of interoperability between products without having to use file-based workflows with import, exporting, and all that kind of thing. And then finally, data accessibility, and that's what is across our entire data initiative, is to provide good, easy access to those who need it, and again, not provide it to anyone outside of that realm. So today we're dealing with file-based collaboration, and everyone knows this is super painful. So as files move between different products and organization, there's a patchwork of standards. Every company has its own way of working with files and versions and where those files are stored and all that network type of stuff. And now with cloud storage, it complicates it even more. So we're looking to standardize that. It also brings challenges like translation and the fact that multiple disciplines cannot work on the same design simultaneously. It also leads to mistakes as teams manage different versions of these files, and it also makes exchange of data across organizational boundaries and even outside of companies and organizations, and due to intellectual property concerns. So we're going to address this by starting by trying to standardize the collaboration model, and that means putting the data at the center. And it's also about describing the data, which then allows for real-time or close to real-time access to the data. So that accomplishes this efficient data access and manipulation item. And it also ensures access controls so that the right data is available to the right people at the right time. And that's super important to not only protect your data, but also deliver effective and efficient sharing strategies. So our data model strategy looks like this, and basically the pie in the sky is imagining a world where data and workflows come together across the entire product lifecycle, and again, regardless of disciplines. So when we start to look at this, we are talking today about the manufacturing data model, and that encompasses the Fusion story. We also have already in general availability as well the AEC data model, and that's taking over the the Forma piece of the industry groups. And then the last piece is this M&E data model, which is bringing the media and entertainment industry into the data model ecosystem. They're currently working on their data model, and the first rev of that has been put out through the Maya software, and you can already use that today. They have not released any developer tools yet. So all of this brings the Autodesk data models to the surface, and it's enabling not only customers, but our partners and our third-party developer community to start working and creating these unique workflows around data. So again, the fundamental idea here is to decompose a file into the granular data, and that data is stored and managed in the cloud in a standardized data model. The data model is a graph database, and this allows users to tap into only the pieces of data that they need instead of moving files around, opening files and authoring tools, and so forth. This way we can make sure that users can trust the data they are working with and that the data is coming from trusted sources. So to look more specifically at the manufacturing data model, again, the idea here is to shift from files to data. And Fusion, as a leader in this concept, has already kind of brought that idea to our customers. So as you know, with Fusion, you're kind of automatically working on a cloud instance of your design. And so it's a very natural behavior for our customers used to that workflow already. So a connected source of manufacturing data across the entire organization is what we're attempting to do here. And it brings this data between desktop products like Fusion as well as third-party applications, for example, ERP, CRM systems. We've had a company connect to SAP, for example. So the manufacturing data model represents granular design and manufacturing data in the cloud, and that is our goal here. So let's switch over now and we'll start talking about the developer tools and resources that are available. So the very first point I want to bring is that, again, thinking about CAD data is really just a giant graph of bits of data that have many relationships to each other. And until recently, all of that rich data is stored in a file container. So when we were designing cloud APIs for our data models, we wanted a really great developer experience that makes querying this graph data very easy and data friendly. So we chose this technology called GraphQL. So this is an open source data query manipulation language for APIs. It's becoming an industry standard, so many companies are using it. A great example is Meta, who is the creator of this technology, and they decided to open source it, which is awesome. Another company that's really using it to its fullest extent is Shopify. So you can see that the industries have embraced this technology, and for us, it was just a natural selection. So it really is an ideal choice for our complex design and make graph data. It provides powerful granular querying capabilities for our multi-relational landscape of design and make data. The queries are human-friendly and easy to learn and exposes the data in a way that Fusion users are already familiar with. So in this particular example, you can see the query on the left is querying a Fusion part, and the details of this query are part number, part name, so forth, and you can see that query lines up exactly with the user interface property palette that comes with Fusion. So the way that you query can even be aligned with how the user interface is designed. So once you are a Fusion user, you can very easily understand how the data is structured. So we have some tools available that will help you to learn how to work with the queries and understand what data is available. So this very first tool is called the Data Explorer. It's implemented using an open source tool called GraphQL. So this is an open source tool that other companies have been using. We've taken it and branded it with Autodesk Platform Services, and we are using this for our tutorial material and examples in the documentation and so forth. So because this is an open source tool, we've also provided the implementation for this as a sample. So you can go to the deployed version at the link that you see on your screen, and you can start working with it directly. But just also be aware that this is also a sample. So if you wanted to create some unique experience within your company or something branded for your users, it's very easy to take the sample and provide the same experience to your users. There are other GraphQL tools out there, but we wanted to choose something that was very common and tool agnostic. So the Data Explorer, again, is used for a lot of our sample queries and the documentation. But if you're if you're happier with tools like Postman or Insomnia, like you would use for REST API calls and testing, GraphQL is supported in those tools as well. And then also Visual Studio Code has some extensions that will enable GraphQL querying as well. So as part of the Data Explorer, there's a lot of capability that's kind of built in. And so you'll have documentation come through the Explorer. So you can open the documentation panel on the left, and it will bring up the documentation for the queries that you're working with. There's also a history palette. So as you're playing with queries and testing different queries out, you may run into a place where you're blocked or, forgot what you did. And with the history palette, it's very easy to just, go back a couple of queries and see where you made your mistake. So that's a very handy feature. The one thing I will mention, though, is be careful with the overall experience because it is browser session specific. So if you clear your cache in your browser and restart the Explorer and so forth, you're going to lose the queries that you built. Okay, so just keep that in mind. What I suggest is, because these queries are clear text, you get a query working something complicated, you can take that query, copy and paste it into a text editor and save it off to the side. You can even, of course, paste it directly into your code when you're ready, and it's very convenient. But just make sure you're not relying too heavily on the Explorer for saving those queries. There's also a feature that's very much like the Microsoft IntelliSense. So when you're in a query block within the code itself, you can start typing and it will bring up the valid fields for that query. So that helps you to learn and see what's available. And then finally, there's also in-place documentation. So when you're hovering over something, you can bring up the summary of that query just to remind you what it can do. And then a separate tool is called the Voyager. So this Voyager is also kind of an open source tool. And what we've done is we've connected it to our Query Explorer. So if we just go back 2 slides, in the upper right-hand corner of the Explorer, you'll see a Voyager link. And when you're in the Explorer, if you click that link, it's going to take you to the Voyager interface within your browser. Now, what Voyager does is allows you to experience the schema. So the schema for the manufacturing data model will be presented here, and what you'll be able to see is everything that's available within a query, all the fields, and how those fields and how the fields relate to other queries and other objects in the system. So it's a very convenient way to kind of get familiar with and learn how the schema is working and overall what is possible for you to query. And then finally, one of the questions we are often asked is, how do we get this into, production code? So it's very easy, actually. And the way it works is the GraphQL server that we provide is simply exposed by a single REST-based endpoint. So you use that endpoint, and as the payload for the call to the endpoint, you'll pass the query and any parameters that go into the query, and that will execute it on our GraphQL server and then return the results to that function. So any programming language that supports REST will work with the GraphQL system. And so it makes it very convenient to start using this within existing code bases. You're already familiar with JavaScript or .NET or whatever your favorite programming environment is. GraphQL plugs into those environments very, very easily. And then finally, just want to point out about the versioning of the data model. So we started a few years ago with version 1, and we got a long way. We got, the concept was well received, but the reality is there was not enough data and not enough access. So version 1 has already been deprecated. So just be aware that version 1 ended in March of 2025, so just a few weeks ago. And version 2 is now the generally available version. And everything we talk about today will be available in version 2 until we reach the version 3 preview. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Make sure the documentation is still in a migratory state. So we have to wait for the docs team to remove V1 completely. So just don't get confused by the fact that V1 is still showing there. Okay, so let's look at some of the functionality. The very first thing to notice is that, we have a full doc set, we have tutorials that are step-by-step, everything is laid out, and just really encourage you to think about going through the tutorials so you get, a grip on how these queries work. The tutorials, again, use the GraphQL Explorer, so it's very convenient. Once you're in the documentation, you're going to realize that the very first step is to navigate down into the data. So as a user, you probably know that your Fusion data lives in a Fusion Teams hub. And within that hub, you'll have your projects, folders, and you drill down to individual components. So GraphQL supports all of those data management functionality. And so you'll need to do that to kind of get down to the design data. But the nice thing about the data implementation is that you don't have to make a REST call for every single operation. So with the REST APIs on the data management side, you typically have to, look at the hub at the high level, and then all the projects, and iterate over them until you find the one you want. And then within the projects, you're going to find folders and individual components, and each one of those is an individual REST call. With GraphQL, you can make a single query to get right down to the exact data you need, as long as you know some of the identifiers for the data you're working with. So once you're down to the data itself, the design and make data, you'll then be able to start doing some of the manufacturing data model queries. So the very first one that's super important to understand is the model hierarchy. So this was implemented to allow people to easily build a bill of material view in your application. It will retrieve the entire assembly hierarchy in one call. So this eliminates the need to, again, iterate over that entire hierarchy, which is typically fetching one child at a time and having to kind of build up that structure. So once you have this model hierarchy, which is really the bill of material, it's really becomes the source of truth for your design. So as you start to work with the hierarchy, you want to, of course, drill down and get access to the components and other aspects of the components. So the manufacturing data model provides you the ability to get all the component properties. You can also do operations such as generate a thumbnail, generate file derivatives, and also get access to physical properties. So these last three components are like I said, operations, and they're asynchronous. So what you have to do is you kick off, let's say you want the thumbnail, you're going to kick off a job to generate the thumbnail if it hasn't been created before, or it may have changed as well, of course, because the design could have changed. So if the thumbnail needs to be generated, it's going to enter into an operation, and you'll use asynchronous polling to see the status of that operation. And when it comes back with success, then you'll be given a signed URL. And these URLs have some time limits, so they expire around 6 hours. And so the URL itself, we suggest you to use it, right away, and then get access to the data that was produced by these operations. The URL will expire, and so we certainly don't recommend that you cache them in any way. So just keep that in mind. We are also supporting the Manage extension properties. So Fusion has this extension feature called Manage, and it kind of overlaps with some of the data that's in the Fusion Manage web service. And so those properties are also written to the data model. And so you can get properties such as life cycle, the item number, revision information, change order, and we even have this ability to get the change order URN or URL. URLs are very handy for, publishing information to your consumers, to your users, in a convenient way. You can just use the URL directly to provide data pages to your consumers. So if we take a step back out of the data model for the design data itself, we also have some project administration APIs. So a lot of companies, have very similar project setups. They may even have the same teams working. And so with the project admin API, what you can do is you can automate the creation of a new project within a hub. And you can also add users to the projects and hubs by inviting them, just like you would through the user interface, using their email address. So this not only allows you to work within your own organization, but if you have external people, contractors, et cetera, that you need to invite to a specific project, you can use the admin APIs to automate and help manage that. There's also a concept of custom properties. So custom properties are an interesting concept in that there's a developer level set. So you build your custom property set in the developer environment, and then you can link that property set to the customer environment and in effect linking it to the design that the customers have. So you can have very unique properties. In this example, we're seeing cost and color, but it can be any property. And you basically create the property set and then assign it to the customer designs, and then the customers can fill those values in with values that make sense for them. That gives you, as the developer, access to their custom data and values, but also gives the customer the experience of whatever workflow and improvement benefits you're providing through your app. And then we also have support for configured designs at a high level. So first of all, from the Fusion perspective, a configured design is basically allowing you to take a component and configure it with different options. So for example, a component may be made of different materials depending on the overall configuration of the assembly. And so with this idea in mind, we've introduced the configure designs aspect in the data model. It's very straightforward. So based on a component version, a component itself, you can query for whether it is configured. So the field there is configuration. And in the results, you're going to see that as either true or false if it happens to be a configured component. So very straightforward and easy to work with. Okay, so that was the version 2 API functionality that we just covered, and all that functionality will be supported in version 3, of course. And now we're going to take a look at what's coming in the next version. So remember the safe harbor here. This is the forward-looking information. So just reminding you that what I'm showing now is coming soon to a beta, and of course, no guarantees that it will come exactly as we present. So first thing we'll do is we'll take a look at the roadmap. So very soon, when this first V3 beta becomes available, you're going to see new features that encompass bill of materials that's centralized. Instead of just a design-based bill of materials, it can be centralized. We're also going to introduce what's called time-based history, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Going to add some additional built-in properties, enabling the ability to concurrently edit properties, and then also shared part numbers, which also kind of supports the idea of bill of materials being centralized and being able to share part numbers across multiple designs. Later, we're looking at time-based file traversals, so the ability to traverse the data in a time-based way. This capability is also enabling a feature in Fusion called Open as Latest, and we're also going to be able to enable search via the API. So that's next on our radar after this first round. And then in the long-term future, we're looking at providing events. So rather than doing polling, like I mentioned on those operations earlier, you'll be able to register an event handler and then just be notified when that operation is complete or has failed or some other condition. And then we're also going to enable the large model viewer for customers and also support the APS viewer SDK for developers for workflows that are outside of Fusion. So enabling you, for example, to see all the properties in a model using the viewer directly instead of having to work through Fusion. Okay, so let's start with bill of materials. This becomes, again, the single source of truth, and it's going to be centralized across all experiences. So whether you're in Fusion or looking at it in Fusion Teams or some other developer-based access, it's going to be kind of the centralized data experience. And then talking about this time-based history, in order to support concurrency and property edits, we needed to make some changes to Fusion's history model. So today, Fusion relies on saving files to capture changes. With each save, this results in a new version. But when we start talking about property changes outside of Fusion especially, we're introducing granular edits that update the data model immediately. So it requires no save, in effect, of the original Fusion design. So with the data model becoming the source of truth for properties, we needed a way to write and read this data in a secure and an efficient way. So with that, we're introducing this new way to work with design history. So using time-based versioning offers several benefits. So we gain this concurrency ability. This allows multiple users to update properties or edit designs simultaneously without blocking each other. This improves workflow efficiency as users do not have to wait for others to finish their changes. It also brings efficiency by reducing the rapid creation of numerous versions, as versions are created only when the user decides to do so. So we now have versions becoming independent of these timestamps. And then enhanced history tracking. The history API will provide a detailed view of all events affecting an object, ensuring transparency and accountability. Okay, so very granular level history that's going to be introduced here. We're also adding additional properties. These are directly added to Fusion components to help capture many of the most common attributes of parts and assemblies. These values will be available from the property panel from Fusion directly, also from the bill of materials and consumed within drawings and available in the desktop client and web clients. And this includes API workflows. So the benefits are that the larger list of properties will better help describe and document the components in a standard way within the design. Consumers of bill of materials, drawings, and API workflows will have more product information available outside of the Fusion client environment. Concurrent editing of properties we mentioned earlier. So with this edit capability, edits can come from other sources than just the Fusion client. So this allows, again, concurrent edits, and multiple people can be working on the same data. And again, remember, all that history is being time-stamped, and so you can also audit and do accountability reports as needed. We're also introducing shared part numbers. So the primary component is the driver for bill of material, the managed properties, and component properties. Characteristics of a shared part number means that, basically multiple models can use it. So a single part number can be associated across multiple models. This is very useful when different representations or levels of details are required for the same part. It's also allowing grouping. Shared part numbers help in grouping different models under one logical identifier, ensuring consistency in inventory tracking and usage. And then finally, it becomes the primary model. So among the multiple models associated with a shared part number, one model is designated as the primary model. So that primary model basically affects everything else, including thumbnails, icons, and representative features. So this whole collaborative editing and capability is coming soon. So you can see on this roadmap layout that we've already started hub management. So in order to support all this new functionality, especially the collaborative editing and the time stamping, a new hub structure had to be set up. So as a result of that, customers will also have to be migrated to the new hub strategy. And so we're starting to do this now. And in the summer, this summer coming up in 2025, we will begin updating existing hubs. And we're hoping that by the end of the year, we'll be able to complete updating all existing hubs. So for this upcoming V3 beta, just remember that you need to have a newer hub, a new hub type, in order to work with it. So as a developer, we've provided a way for you to request a test hub. So you can use this QR code, scan it, and it's going to allow you to enter your details. And then when we're ready, we'll reach out and give you access to this new V3 structured hub. So a few house cleaning things here. V2 API works on existing hubs. It's going to work with new hubs and migrated hubs as well, so you don't need to worry too much about V2, but just know that there's a few caveats, especially around viewing properties that are made, property edits that are made outside of the file. And there's going to be no support, of course, for new properties and, of course, the new features. Now, V3, the beta will be coming soon, and it's only going to work with the new and migrated hubs. So, and this is how to enable those previously mentioned features. So let's take a quick look at some use cases and workflows. So this first one, this first slide is just kind of describing some of the workflows and things that we've enabled. So as we continue on the journey to connect our entire software portfolio to the data models, customers are already realizing these better outcomes from connected data today. So the three examples we're going to show are concrete examples coming from partners and customers. So this first one is a company called OpenBOM, and using the manufacturing data model APIs, they're able to access a design's part list and properties, which enables automating the bill of materials and seamless navigation to the part hierarchy within a model. This is used within their own user interface to provide custom functionality. The creation of the bill of materials in general often takes a repetitive and manual task, and is now automated and enables faster purchasing, procurement, and manufacturing decisions. In addition to automating the bill of material with custom properties, they were able to add supplemental information such as supplier name and other details back into the design, which allows the Fusion users to see this information within the Fusion experience. And this is their custom interface that you're seeing now, and basically using the data directly from the data model. This next example is from a partner named Prototech, who produced a project for a company called Prey that is integrating this solution within their SEMA Pro sustainability analysis tool. So they've used the capability of the manufacturing data model APIs to pull the entire model hierarchy of the design into their web application. And they've used the component properties like mass, volume, material, density to analyze the design's carbon footprint and water usage. And this is then passed back to the customer for sustainability analysis on a design. They write this data back to the data model as custom properties, and that's how it gets delivered back to the customer. In effect, this accelerates design decision-making and sustainability goals by integrating the sustainability aspect into early-stage product design with insights for more sustainable outcomes. And you'll see this is in Fusion, and there's the mass properties that were brought back through, and the custom properties that came from the sustainability app. The last example here is from one of our longstanding partners, Cideon, and they're using the manufacturing data model to integrate manufacturing design and make data into an ERP system like SAP. So this automates downstream sourcing, procurement, pricing, and inventory decisions. They are also tying the two systems together by writing back the SAP ID associated with a Fusion component, including SAP documentation information, custom properties, etc., back into the system using the model, the data model's custom properties feature. This is a powerful integration and automation use case that shows the design data in Fusion and downstream ERP systems using that data, and they are in sync. So those IDs are used to link the records together, and as long as the IDs remain accurate, the data remains linked and can live in their own appropriate places. Okay, we'll do a quick summary of resources. Just want to remind you that there is rich developer documentation. There's 2 entry points. There's a solution overview page that introduces the benefits, use cases, customer success stories, news, and events. Encourage you to look at this if you're a decision maker, a high-level person. There's also the developer documentation, which we looked at before. Again, a reminder about V2 being the currently generally available API and V3 coming soon to beta. And make sure you don't get caught in the V1 system until we can get that removed from our documentation. And then the last thing is, if you need help, you're able to get direct support as an ADN member, and we also support our Stack Overflow community. And that brings us to the end.